Hello and welcome to the Radical World Podcast, what used to be rHatchery Live. And I'm here with Matt Perez, my partner. And today we have a conversation with Dr. Matt Marturano. Matt is, I'm going to get confused with all these Matts, but Mr. Marturano, Dr. Marturano is down in, where was that again, Matt?
Costa Rica.
Costa Rica, and on the side of a mountain. And we were having a conversation about that. Matt, I'm going to give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about your background. But because this is the first show of the year where we're sort of saying we're changing the name, we're changing the format, I wanted to highlight a little bit about what's different, how we think we want to do this podcast. We've been doing it for quite a while, over a year, and we wanted to change it up to, number one, match the radical world movement that we're embarking on, but also to change the way that we engage with the folks that we want to talk to. We realized that we were doing interviews when we really wanted to have conversations, and so that's the mode today. Is not to get into an interview mode where we're just asking you questions, but getting into a conversation about this radical world that we all want to see. And how do we get to this radical world? And how do we understand the current world that we're in, the fiat world that we're in? And just before the talk, I told you a little bit about the lenses, the fiat lenses and the radical lenses. But maybe we can have a conversation about the work that you're doing and the world that you're living in, and how that relates to the radical world and also the fiat world that we've discussed. So welcome. Thank you.
Good, sure. Thank you for having me, Matt and Jose. I'll give you a quick version of some background for me. So my education is actually, I'm a naturopathic doctor. I went to undergraduate school at the University of Michigan, and I earned a dual degree in philosophy and biology, and worked a lot then at the philosophy of science and such. And this was around this time the internet was really just emerging, and I was getting to be towards my last year and had no idea what I was going to do next. And went out there on the internet and learned a bit about naturopathic medicine, which I had never heard of before. And one of the things that really intrigued me was that there was a set of philosophical principles that were followed by practitioners, and first, do no harm is one of them, perhaps the one we've heard about the most. But the idea that there's some type of structure or format for I think you lost my video there. A structure or format for how to approach a patient in a way that we can actually understand them in a truly holistic manner as a whole person, and use that in order to make better recommendations for them. And in the same, so I practiced as a naturopathic doctor up until shortly before we left the United States, so around 2016 or so. And when I met my now wife Angela, she was working as a recruiter in the automotive industry in the Detroit area, and shortly thereafter was kind of when the financial crash happened, and they're pretty much all hiring in the automotive industry had come to a complete grinding halt.
Mm-hmm.
So so what happened we're in a position where we're looking for anything to something that we could do, and that maybe put both of our skill sets together. And that's where we came up with the idea of Orchid Holistic Search. The idea is of holistic search is that we're not just taking the match between a job description and a resume, in the way that a doctor might match up a diagnosis with a remedy, but that we're learning to see how we can envision a whole person inside of a whole organization. And what we found is that this results in much more sustainable hires. People are happier when they work for an organization, and then they're also happier when they leave, which I think leads us into the idea of now talking about kind of regenerative business practices, and specifically here, regenerative hiring practices, and the notion of the acknowledgement or acceptance that, not everyone's going to join a company and stay there forever, and that's okay. Um, and that when people are leaving an organization, they are the seeds that organization has made, and those seeds go out. And if they're good seeds, then the essence of that organization spreads. And this is a wonderful thing, because if it's good, and if it's helpful for people, and it raises the bar all around. And for a lot of companies, they may not be using the term regenerative, but they have a reputation for producing good and great candidates, and they
Hmm.
don't shy away from that. They're not trying to maintain sort of an illusion of that they're the best fit for everyone forever, and that it might be totally fine to be at a company for some years and have that be part of your journey.
So we've lost your video. I wonder if you wanted to try to get it back on again, since it's so early in our conversation here.
Sure, let me take another shot at this. I'll come right back. Let's see if it turns on here.
So Matt, while Marturano is away, I wonder, when you first saw some of the things that he had posted, what caught your eye?
To be honest, I don't remember, but it was the way he was saying it and stuff like that. And now that I know it a little bit more, I think it probably had to do with that people that leave are a good thing. And we didn't take advantage of that in our previous company, but we celebrated everybody that left. Everybody got a party, and we had cake and stuff like that. And that a lot of people talk very highly of our company, and a lot of people told us, well, we agreed to be interviewed like you because such and such said. And so that was the thing that caught my eye, I think.
Awesome. So thank you. I'm going to just call you Doc, if you don't mind.
That's fine. Sure.
It's a lot easier than saying Marturano. Um, thanks for letting us know that, because that I always find it, when talking to somebody, if you don't know who they are and where they come from, it's really hard to have a conversation, because you don't know what it is that they're doing. What you just said, while you stepped away to resync your video, I asked Matt what originally piqued his interest about you and the posts that you were making on LinkedIn. And he can't exactly remember, but he says that it probably was more about the vibe than the things you were saying. It sounds, by the way you're saying it, like that it's this holistic approach, and the value of recognizing that people are flowing through life. And if you just segment them off, and you say, not only are you segmented to this job and to this title and to this company and everything else, that we're really sort of boxing them in. Does that kind of sound like what you're dealing with?
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think that we're many of us, myself included, were raised with the notion that you pick a career and you have a trajectory and you just follow that. And what we found, or when we were actually getting into the business and starting things up and getting real experience, is that the narrative didn't really align with the experiences that people were having. In particular, executives, and we do executive search business, and that um, there seemed to be a a a gap between, the story that we've heard and the expectations that maybe people are taking with themselves into the workplace, and then actually what's actually happening in fact. And I think, we can see this a lot of times, even still, just in a simple way on, on LinkedIn, where people are still feeling that they're being attacked by a hiring manager, with respect to, uh, well, oh, I see that there was a gap in your resume or this year, even if it was in the middle of COVID or whatever. And it's like the idea that, we have to explain every second of what's going on in our lives outside of it, or that we're not good candidate material, or maybe if we have a history and we saw that someone was at a different company and they left after 18 months. It's real easy to say, well, we want to stick away from them. They're jumpy. But if we don't ask them, if we don't have a conversation and we say what was going on at the time, what's happening with you, and in a way that is allows someone to share what they feel comfortable with, instead of feeling that they're just being put under the thumb, then we really don't know why or what was going on. And frankly, if someone got hoodwinked into joining an organization based on promises that were false, based on a job description that wasn't accurate reflection of the job, what oftentimes happens is they get into a position and it turns out that the employer wanted someone at a higher level than their experience, but wanted to pay them at a lower level, for example. That's a good reason to leave, and that actually should be something that an employer who is calling themselves holistic, or sustainable, or regenerative, which we work in the natural products industry, so um, there's a lot of that,
Mhm.
the idea that this is just to kind of very quickly valence something as positive or negative, or this is good or this is bad, and just sort of tick some boxes off. Well, that's not really holistic at all. And in the same vein, uh, encouraging and working with employers just to kind of relax a little bit around that, and say, let's look at some of these other things about this person and about a candidate that we're presenting, instead of just like the standard canned, this is their tenure, this is their track, how long have they been here, how many breaks, and see if this is a person that really fits into your organization. And to continue from there, one of the things that we've been seeing evolve over the last couple of years is this shift from culture fit to kind of a culture add approach to an organization. And what we found, and I think many people have found, is that when we try to fit someone into a culture, what we end up happening is creating a monoculture. And camera went down again. I do apologize for that. This is not a typical problem for my camera. Um, the idea that what we end up happening is making our organization a monoculture, and monoculture organizations don't produce good seed. And
Exactly.
and not only that, but if something happens to their monocrop, if a pest comes in, right, it's just the wrong one at the wrong time, the entire thing is decimated.
Right.
And because there's no resilience built into the system.
Right.
And I believe that a lot of reason that we don't have the resilience built into the system is because we're using the wrong metaphors from life. And
Hmm.
it does get back to this idea of we were talking a little bit before about the even the word radical and how it relates to the roots, um, in that it, oh, I lost my own train of thought. What was the last thing I said, Jose?
You were saying that radical and relating to the roots and the fact that I think where you were going is if we're so disconnected from ourselves and disconnected from the structures, the holistic view of of nature and ourselves, that we have these different, we use the idea of the lenses, right? I mean, we
Right.
talk about the fiat lens, and the question that I was going to ask you was like what you've just described. What do you think caused that? What kind of beliefs, what kind of lens caused people to think this is the best way that we can deal with hiring people? We need to put them in these boxes. We need to define them by these resumes. We need to, as you said, sort of push them together and make them fit. What's that? What do you think is that lens that says this is the way we should be doing it?
Right. I think there's a few levels to it, and in a very basic way, it's this idea that people aren't part of nature, you know, so that we need to be treated in a way that is different, that is, and in a way that it's fundamentally adversarial, because there's something that's dangerous about us. And I think that what a lot of times people their experience when going through an interview or hiring process, despite it being grueling and sometimes it should be, is that it's very adversarial, and whereas
Mm-hmm.
they're not being feel like they're being approached as someone who's being invited to join in a partnership with a company, that they're already not being valued for what they contribute, but they're being assessed for how big of a risk is this person, how big are they of a risk that they're going to leave, how big of a risk are they that they might have something else in their life come up, that will interfere with their work. And when you start off from there, well, how can you end up in a destination that you wanted to arrive? And the second thing along those lines is that even when we look at our analogies from nature, they're very, very skewed. And we hear a lot of the, survival of the fittest, and it's a jungle out there, and these sort of tropes that we hear all the time that supposedly come from science and they get applied to the business world. The reality is that's not true at all. I mean, when I was an undergraduate in 1996, we were learning already about multi-level selection theory. So what this shows is that cooperation is at least as important as competition overall in the overall process of evolution, and that organisms and living systems will sometimes favor competition, sometimes favor cooperation, but it's this sort of tick-tock pendulum back and forth that really creates the growth that we're looking for. And then along those same lines, it's the taking an ecological perspective on systems themselves. So if we look at a living system, and we say, how fit is this? And fitness is what are the chances of it to surviving to the next generation? Well, that's important, but fitness is not the only characteristic that we're looking for. When we're evaluating a biological system from an ecological perspective, we're looking at fitness, we're looking at health, we're looking at viability. And just like any system, it cannot do all of these things well at once.
Right.
To make the system work, to make any system work, the system has to cycle through different functions, so that way the ones that it's been using previously get kind of rest, right? They get time to rest and regenerate, to sort of recoup some resources, do something else, and we focus over here for a while. And so what gets lost in translation when we try to apply this to business is that it's just all about the fitness, and those are measured by KPIs and sales and targets, and not that those things aren't important, but if we only focus on those things all the time, then the business is kind of doomed to failure eventually, or kind of maybe doomed to continue to be sold off and kind of consumed by another organization. It's doing the same thing, and I
Mm-hmm.
think we see this happening a lot.
Like for me, what you've just described sounds like uh, we've built a lens of judgment and control, where we as those in power, whatever the power structure is. In the case of an organization, it's the company. Have the view that what they should be doing is judging whether people fit or don't fit, and also controlling that relationship. That's the to me what you've just described is sort of this fiat lens of our role is to be in charge here, to judge these individuals as whether they qualify or not, fit or don't fit, good or not good.
It's actually simpler than that. The question really is, when you're interviewing somebody in the old way, can these people, are these people docile enough, this person is docile enough to make me money? That's it. And then come to collaboration or competition and cooperation, all that stuff.
So you're saying docile enough? Is that what you're saying?
Docile enough. Yeah, I mispronounced it probably. And enough to make me money. So they at the same time, they want somebody who's innovative and will do things because they think are more newer or can be sold better. Everything is judged by money. Can you make me money? And that's the primary problem. All these operations, so long as it's a money making business, that's all I judge on. And things get changed on the way down, but that's the only judgment.
Doc, how does that reflect what you see on the day to day?
Yeah, I think Matt has really kind of summed it up there very well. And the idea here is that if you're focusing on making good seed, all of those other things are going to happen along the way. Your company's going to make money. It's going to be profitable. People are going to want to come work for you. You're going to actually be able to get more talent and better talent for cheaper. When people see that the product or the service of your company is not the end that's attempting to be attained here, it's actually if you're focusing on how to help people grow through that journey, then all of these other things just sort of take care of themselves a lot easier. And the thing that with the culture fit and culture add is really, I think it really lines it up correctly. And I recall when we even had in our website of a different iteration of it, the culture fit on there. And then the first time I had heard of the difference, I immediately went to change it because I was like, oh my God, oh no, I have to immediately change this from our website because that's not what we want to do and not how we're doing it. And I think this leads into some insights on value alignment that I could share here. And would you like me to dip out and reconnect the camera for a minute? So before I get
Sure.
into that?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, please.
All right, I'll be right back.
Matt, I would argue that until you have a view that you can control things, that you don't have a
Control what? Control what?
control
Making
people.
money.
Control people.
You have that, but that falls from the I got to make money. I got to make a profit for my boss because otherwise I'm going to get fired. So I think it comes from profits first, and everything else comes down to that. You may have a different feeling, but that's the way I feel.
Right. And Doc, is the profit, do you think the driver, the only driver in how people see other people?
The principal driver.
Yeah, I think that has a lot to do with it. The idea is, we're evaluating this person in terms of what can we extract from them.
Yes.
and not what can we put into them, how are they going to contribute to this soil of our organization. And it's not that it's wrong to think in terms of, what is an employee going to bring, but that it's not being framed in a way um, that's reciprocal, that's not realizing that there's an exchange happening. And then because it's so one-sided, again, I think that's why it tends to collapse back towards, can we control this person. And nobody ever says that, right? Nobody ever says that in their job order, or in their pre-search call, that's what they're looking for. And even as recruiters, we sometimes get into trouble because we might be halfway into selling a position to someone until we realize that this company might just be paying a little bit more lip service to these things and then they're actually doing in practice. And that leads me to something I wanted to share with respect to values alignment, because now this is a thing that's everyone's talking about. It's not new, but it seems to have gone awry, and I wonder how did that happen. It's like, look, there's values, let's align around them, run our company by these values. And what I've discovered for myself is that a lot of times we end up aligning around values that are just very ephemeral. They might be great values, but they're just very vague. And in a lot of cases, if you dive into the definition of them, there's something that's either very subjective or very circular. And the issue is this creates a situation where if the context changes, so if suddenly there's a pandemic or a financial crisis or a war or something else changes the external context, that value gets flipped. And we often see that what we thought the value was is now people are doing the opposite thing, and they may not apparently even be aware that they've flip-flopped their behavior while they're paying lip service to the same value. And in that respect, the values alignment, what I find is if you want to align around values, we need to choose values that we can define in terms of behaviors, in terms of something that's observable, that's not a question. We need it to be able to point. It is a judgment of sorts, but we need to be able to point and say that is the value. And what this will do is it eliminates this sort of black box, man behind the curtain effect, where people are allowed to continue to pay lip service and say, oh, this and that, we're all about it, but their behavior, you're not sure. And what I've also found in terms of people being treated as threats is if they come into an organization and they find out that there was a lot of lip service being paid to the values and that the company is not following the values, and they start to speak out about that, then
Right.
they're immediately labeled a threat and a target. They're harassed and they're bullied and they're threatened and this and that and the other. I will share that I experienced that myself even back when I was in naturopathic medical school, and I was shocked to have that kind of experience. But we had all of these philosophical principles that we were supposed to be following in practice. And the school that I attended was having some administrative and financial challenges at the time. And by then I was already involved. I was vice president of student government. I was in the academic excellence committee, all this and that. And one day, in the context of a whole school meeting with the president there and everyone else, I suggested, why don't we consider taking these philosophical principles that we are holding up and applying them to the administration of the profession itself. And of course, one of those is like treat the cause, right? So like, what is really the cause of the problem that we're having here? Um, and how, and then, prevention, like, well, and how can we prevent this in the future instead of just constantly being reactive to what's happening? And, I really didn't think it was that radical of a thing to say at the time. And yet, what I noticed from that point forward is I was edged out of the academic excellence committee. I was edged out of student government association. Every time there was a meeting from that point forward and I raised my hand, it was just kind of like, hello, hello, and just like looking past me, obviously, because someone was scared, I guess, that I might call them out or say something uncomfortable, and it's like, well, if you weren't if we weren't being hypocritical about our principles in the first place, then there wouldn't be anything to say about it. And I notice this a lot on LinkedIn when I make posts, and the reason sometimes I take a pretty harsh tone. I do use polemics. I use hyperbole. It's intentional. I only got so much space, but the reason is because I feel that I'm in the position now where I'm supposed to leverage my privilege to speak out, right? There's no one that's going to fire me. There's no one that's going to deny me a job or whatever for saying the things that I'm pretty sure are already on people's minds. And it's funny because oftentimes my wife Angela she really does most of the hands-on recruiting, and she goes to trade shows such, and people will come up to her on the floor and be like, "Oh, I'm such a fan of your husband's posts," and she'll tell me, "Oh, so and so," and I'm like, "Who? I I've never seen them. They have not liked or commented even one time." And I can't say that I know for sure why that is, but I suspect it's because people are so really terrified that someone in the HR or their boss might see them engaging, and that they're going to be punished for it. And it's sort of like that's really why I kind of take a sometimes
Yeah,
take an
a
extra
direct dig.
dig at things. Yeah, exactly.
Well, and I think part of what we do is kind of the same without being accusatory of the individual, because that's really not what we're trying to do. We think that the issue isn't the individual, but the lens that they've been asked to wear.
Yeah.
Right? We're born without these lenses. We're born seeing clearly. But then our mom and dad says, don't say that to the other people. We don't want people to know what's happening in our home. And the teacher says, yeah, you're not supposed to say those things in the classroom. That's something you keep out of the classroom. And the boss says, no, you can't do that at work. That's a personal, your private life. You can't do that here. And before you know it, we're all sort of caged by these lenses. And it's not something that we chose to see the world through. It's what was given to us. And those people gave it to us because it was given to them. Right? The intention here is not to say, oh, bosses are bad, companies are bad. They're just doing the best that they can within the lens that they're working through. Right? If they see the world as this dog-eat-dog world, then that's the world that they're going to operate in. And that's how I hire people, and that's how I fire people. I mean, Google this week has laid off yet another 1,000 people or more. They're not even saying how many people they're laying off. This is an example of, the company that would do no evil has laid off 13,000 people in the last year. So much for do no evil, right? Like, there are ways for us to work with people that do not require that they be even employees, and we're advocates of that, of self-management or co-management and co-ownership as part of this radical awakening. It's that, right? It's recognizing that for us to be able to see a radical world, we need to have that radical lens, but that radical lens then brings about new ways of working together, new ways of seeing each other. And it's not about saying we have to destroy the company, we have to destroy the hierarchy, we have to destroy the way we do, everything. No, that's just more force. And that's just going to keep bringing about more force. But how do we create new? How do we create new ways of seeing, new ways of being, new ways of being with one another, and new systems? We still need systems, but those systems need to be different systems that are in keeping with a holistic view that you're describing when you're talking about a new way of hiring, but also a new way of doing organizations. You're calling them regenerative business. I would argue that a regenerative business is really a radical business, a radical company. And a radical company is really an organization that emerges through a radical lens, a view of the world as it really is, rather than the world we've been taught that we're doing. And that teaching, again, wasn't something that somebody's like, you have to do this for this bad reason, and you're going to be doing it as a bad person to do it for the bad reason. It's more like, hey, you want to survive? Put this lens on, because if you don't, you're not going to survive. And that's only true if it's a dog-eat-dog world and you're not being a dog.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I think you've encapsulated it well. And in the same vein, if for those people who aren't functioning with that lens.
Oh,
so
not only did we lose his video, we lost him completely.
okay, so he's back. So
I'm still. It threw me back into the back room. I'm here.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
You're back. You're good.
Oh, great. So yeah, there's just a lot that's unfortunately lost with that approach. And as you said, we don't need to kind of like take a torch and burn everything to the ground, but in the same vein, that this other like, well, this is what we've always done and this is what we always know. I think that there's been, until fairly recently, a veil that's been drawn over a lot of this lens, right? Because there are people out here in the world who are not operating that way, but the voices aren't getting amplified as much. I mean, thank you so much for doing this podcast, because it's like trying to break through the algorithms, right? Where that have already decided what is the thing that they're looking for, that they want you to say. I mean, we're seeing this again now on LinkedIn, I think, with these collaborative articles, where it's like, well, just put it out there and then crowdsource until someone says what you already wanted them to say. And then and then amplify that voice and make it sound like it came from a third party. But all the other people who aren't saying what you wanted to say, or their take isn't what you were looking for, their voices, they're not getting heard. And even in the same vein, when there's economic challenges, and it's tough times, and it's in the same vein, it's good to know that, there are people out there who are still doing okay. And it's not just because they're exploiting everyone and they're stealing everything, and then because they're bad people, evil people. They've actually taken some of this wisdom and ideas, and they've worked inside. They've done that work on the inside to allow themselves to navigate what we would call a high VUCA environment. So volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And that's a lot of the work that things that I'm investigating now is instead of that lens that we need to eliminate VUCA, this is bad, chaos is bad, we need to eliminate it, we need to get rid of it, then that's exactly why instead we need to put this very rigid structure over it. And instead of learning little by little, day by day, piece by piece in our normal lives, to take a little bit of that in and to transform it into something creative. That the chaos is the source of the creativity that so many people, I feel, have been cut off from, and then they often feel like it's been taken from them. And in the same vein, that's because it's all been cut off from the roots, because the roots of it all is chaos, it's confusion, it's uncertainty and ambiguity. And even though these are uncomfortable things, we are very, very capable of engaging with them in a way that produces a result that we want.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Said very well. And for example, when we started disclosing everything about the company, the previous company, that's when we started to get people that were better contributors, that weren't afraid of many things, that weren't afraid to say, hey, this is wrong. Why don't we do it this way? And one of two things, either they had a good solution, or sometimes we could say, well, we tried that and it blew in our faces.
Right.
So we could have that conversation. And so everything you're saying is music to my ears, in the sense that it was proven with just co-management. What we're trying to push now really is co-ownership, not only co-management, but only the fact that you feel like an owner of the place. And you are, because you are an owner of the place. And in years past, all we had is a 600-year Dutch invention called stocks. So I take my company, it costs $100, I sell one share of stock to 100 people, I get my company. And they're owners too. They financially benefit from the company. Well,
Right.
Why not do it with everybody? If ownership is good and it grows, why not do it with everybody? And the problem has been the human that decides that you're good and you're not, and you're good and you're not. And we eliminated that human by having everybody make the decision, and then to create the decision to, hey, that's worth this much, and it's worth that much, and it's worth that much. You are an owner of the company, and that makes all the difference in the world. Sometimes we'll go for profit because everybody's living hand to mouth or whatever, but sometimes you go for more external things like let's fix that walk, or let's help that hospital that burned down. It could be things that people care about and are passionate about, and that's the important thing. So, and the foundation is there. The radical foundation is there, only to keep it on the path. I was wrong. Only for people to ask the question, are we still in the path? It's not, you're not being forced to stay in the path, but you're being encouraged to talk about it and say, hey, what about what you're doing is not meeting this, it's not meeting our impact. Well, that's because the situation has changed, which is usually the excuse I give you. The situation has changed and we have changed with it. Yeah, but it's not meeting our impact.
Right.
And then go from there. So, and because you're an owner, you can't be fired. You can't, that person will start giving you, recognizing your contributions, but you can't just, if everybody else recognizes that contribution, then one person, it's not a big deal. The problem now is the reverse. It's one person, it's all there is. If he says, I'm gonna fire you, I'm going to, I gotta cut your benefits because you're drawing too much benefits or whatever. That's it. That's the only person that can make the decision. Now it's everybody making a decision, and that's the big difference. What we're trying to do is at least elevate companies, and we're making a distinction between businesses and companies. Bring companies at the level of the 21st century, and take advantage of the things that carry in your pocket, and stuff like that. So,
yeah, I definitely can relate to what you're saying, Matt, and see that happening, in the day to day. Would you like me to try one more time, maybe get 10 more minutes of video here and pop back in and out, or keep talking?
no, keep talking. Well,
Just keep talking.
I'd say let's try to, yeah, why don't you reboot? It's been pretty quick, so.
Yeah, I can just come right back.
Yeah.
All right.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
And what you just said, Matt, about the idea that there's that when we look at how we move forward in an organization from the standpoint of us versus the standpoint of the organization, it completely alters what it is that we're doing, right? If what we're here is to serve the company rather than serve ourselves.
Well, serve the community that's making up the company. Yeah.
Right. But what I'm saying is, in the case of me joining, say, Google, right? And Google says, okay, well, these are our objectives. And then they change their mind. These aren't the objectives anymore. And your role here is no longer valid.
Right.
I didn't choose what the objectives were initially.
Right.
I didn't choose the fact that we're changing our minds around what the objectives are. I didn't choose the fact that, an AI doing sales is going to be more efficient than me doing sales, which is the case today with the thousands that have been let go over the last couple of days. They're being replaced by AI to do the most of the sales.
Well, they can't make as much money as the AI.
Sorry?
They cannot bring me as much profits as the AI can.
Right. Because why should I pay somebody $500,000 when I can have an AI repeat, rinse and repeat? So my point was to follow on what Matt was saying when you were away, Doc, which was wrapping up as you stepped off, that when we think about holism, to use your terminology, when we add an organization and its needs as a separate entity from ours, the community, our internal community, external community, and life as a whole, nature as a whole, then those needs start to define a different level of behavior. Again, the lens comes down, right? And now it's okay to lay people off. It's okay to do the things that we do because it contributes to our mission and we're in control. We're the ones that need to do this, and this is justifiable, right? It's justifiable through this lens, right? The question then is, moving forward in this new way of organizing, new ways of seeing each other, new ways of having a regenerative way of building organizations and operating. Do you see that this new lens, this radical lens, is, you say you're seeing it everywhere. How prevalent is it? And what do you think needs to happen in order for those things that are manifesting themselves to become mainstream? How do we do that?
Well, I think it starts, with these types of conversations that we're having right now, and it just even people seeing the conversation happen and how it unfolds, and seeing that there are different ways of approaching the situation. And then eventually we're going to need to have organizations that maybe take a little risk and try something different. And, it may not all work out, but one of the things I think about, for example, is just the organizational structure. If we're going to go back to the idea of the seed dispersal, and getting back to Google, like maybe if you laid 1,000 people off, is there nothing for those individuals that your company is offering to help them find their next step? You see, you like, why wouldn't you do that? It can only benefit your company to do that, because then those people are going to go wherever they go next, and then their experience with you is not going to be just a terrible disaster.
But
And
but
it's
even to say that, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but even to say that puts us in that lens where we say that the company has control over you, that you're not part of the decision making process. You're not part of
oh,
the sensing process. You're not part of the reacting process. You are a pawn in the company's game, and that in itself seems completely torn from the reality of holism. Like what where did we come up with this idea that we can play a game that is separate from life? Like that this game is over here, we get to play it, we get to fire people, hire people, do whatever the hell we want. And those people, like, you know, we've essentially farmed ourselves,
mhm.
right? We've farmed us. We talk about farming animals, we talk about farming plants. We have farmed us, and we're harvesting us at the risk of not only destroying ourselves as human beings, our health and our lives and our future as human beings, but all of life. Because, you know, we're screwing up bad enough that we can destroy all of life here.
Mhm.
So how is it that we think that this lens is serving us? Like, how is this lens serving us when we see that individuals are being treated no better than a chicken or a hog in a farm? We get to do with them what we will, and when we're done, get rid of them.
Or eat them.
Or hey, we're not doing that yet. I hope. But
Uh,
am I mean, I get so passionate about this. Am I wrong here?
no, no, I don't think so at all. And what I was saying earlier was like, even if you're gonna be like that, do something, right? But we don't have to do it that way at all. And the thing that I think we're getting stuck on, and I wish I had the answer, and I'm still working on it, but there seems to be like a sort of a retcon, like a retroactive continuity with a narrative, because when you, at least when I have engaged with or attempted to engage with people on this, it's sort of just like, well, that's what we've always done. That's what it's been like since forever. And when I go and I look at forever, and one of the things that I've been using AI for is actually to try to break through this shell. It's not easy, but the information's out there, that no, this is not how it's always been. This is not the only way that people have ever acted. This isn't just the way of the world. It's not the law of the jungle or this or that or the other. This idea was invented at some point, that still seem, at least to me, a little bit obfuscated. These ideas that we're just taking as for granted as, oh, this is just how it works. This is the world, and it's like, no, that's just a story. So that, we see this a lot of times, for example, with very extreme forms of nationalism, when someone's digging into the history books, and then they want to find and cherry pick something that justifies this entire fabrication that they have about a pure people who lived in a pure land and spoke a pure language. I think, and not that I want to get super political about it, so we'll shift to the language part. The state global standard has been multilingualism since forever. Since forever we've had language. Most people in most places speak multiple languages, and therefore just the idea that like there was a people that only spoke one language somewhere in some isolated little box where they lived, that's not true. And along the same lines, we project this back into history, and we've all learned, that, well, the Chinese were over here, and the Sumerians were over here, and the Egyptians and the Indians, and these were all separate cultures. They were all in their little boxes. And by the way, they all bootstrapped themselves up right out of the dust, fully formed with religion, administrative systems, politics, philosophy, art, uh, weaponry, clothes. It's just one man, usually one man, popped out of nowhere and just created this entire civilization. And it's like, how did we even come to believe that? But not only that, but now we know that it's not true. It's just not true. We know, and I put these posts up when I find them, that there was an intercontinental trade network throughout the entire Bronze Age. There never was these little separate civilizations that were all isolated from each other that we looked. And so that's an example of how we project into the past, right, what we wanted, the story that we keep wanting to tell, and then we use that as a justification for why there's just no other story to tell. That's all there is. We didn't make the world. That's how it was. And that's the thing that I think, in re-engaging these narratives as well, these myths, what we consider to be universal myths or archetypes, that reinforces, that's a lens of like, this is just how it goes.
Right.
And that's not true.
And that's the thing, when we adopt this lens, as it's given to us throughout our lifetimes, as we adopt the lens, we don't know that it's a lens. We see it as the world, right? This is what it is. Mom said that's the way the world works. Teacher said that's the way the world works. Boss said that's the way the world works. That's the way the world works. And then, now that this is the way the world works, if I look back, I can go, that this must be how the world worked.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, the people who reflect in this lens, right? I can go and find the nice authoritarian guy and say, this guy was the one that made this lens work. And therefore, that's the guy that I can point to as the one that's going to take us forward.
So what you guys are saying is that the Tower of Babel was wrong.
I'm not prepared to claim that fully, but it seems to be that way from what I've found. I think that some of these stories are actually just propaganda pieces,
Yeah,
that have come down to us.
You benefit from a book called Debt, DEBT, by a guy that I admire, but whose name I forget. He's dead, so it's okay to read his book. And he claims that the whole thing started when we converted debt from a personal thing to coins. And in fact, if you're half Spanish, so I can insult back half of you, the way the Spaniards handle America was, in a sense, what caused it to be one language. We all speak Spanish, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it turns out that in Spain, they don't speak Spanish. They speak mostly Castilian, which was those people that started the whole thing. But there's also Basque, there's also Bauli, there's also Galician, there's also Catalonian. There's all kinds of little languages. And but when we want to talk to each other, we talk Castilian, because that was the language of the church. Mm-hmm. And so stories, you said something like it before, that we all caught it in our own stories. And what Jose keeps referring to the lens is really the story. And we're going to go from one story to another. We cannot live without stories. But we'd rather that the story be about how can we do better, how can we grow, which you mentioned before. And how can leaving the company not be a trader's thing, but rather something that you do because you're not contributing there anymore. You go somewhere else, you contribute. That's not treason. That's just the way that people work, and that's what we want to push. I got to say two things, and I'll shut up. One is next week we're having Lacey Benton. She's founder of Liberty Mind and a Semco style Pathfinder. I don't know what that means, but we're going to find out when we talk to her. And that's on January 22nd, so next week. And the other thing is I've had a blast. Listen, you give me a lot of ideas from listening to you talk. So
Yeah, it wasn't a blast. Unfortunately, we had those video issues, but that's fine. It works. It works nonetheless. We were able to have the conversation. I'm glad. I still think we could be a little bit more conversational. It still felt a little bit like we were asking questions, but we'll get there. It's a step at a time.
Yeah.
You know, this was our first in this format. Love to invite you, one, to join Radical World and to be part of this, helping develop this language, helping develop this narrative, helping develop and re-emphasizing this story, because this isn't our story. This is humanity's story, and we have to all work on it together. And how do we, help ourselves and others flip the lens, because it's not so easy to do, right? Even though you know that you need to flip the lens, you can't always do it, and you're not always doing it.
also a lot of this.
Yes, there is. There's a little peek out. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we invite you to do that. We invite to keep you in conversation with us, and to continue the conversation. One of the things that we usually do post show, but I'm going to do it while we still have folks listening, is invite you to invite others to this conversation, either directly with us, or that you have the conversation with them, if that's something you would like to do.
Okay.
But to have this conversation and continuing to build on this conversation together, for the sake of being able to flip this lens as humanity, not as individuals. And so thank you again for joining us. Thank you for the conversation, and I hope that you will continue with us down this path of building this narrative. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Jose and Matt, for having me. And it felt very conversational to me, and it's enjoyable. I feel I'm coming away feeling that there is really something percolating here, that can produce a different outcome from what we've been seeing. So thank you for your work.
Thank you.